All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Demi, and I'm here to welcome you to tonight's author talk, presented in partnership with the Kamloops Society for the Written Art. Tonight, we welcome JP from the Kamloops Society for the Written Arts as our guest host, and Shawn Bird as our guest author. I have a couple of quick announcements before I turn hosting duties over to JP. If you can't stay with us for the whole event, that's not a problem. After it is over, it will be recorded and available for viewing on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. If you have joined us on Zoom, your video and microphone will remain off throughout the event. And if you are watching the event on Facebook Live, feel free to type any questions you have into the comment section. And I will be monitoring this and make sure that Shawn gets your questions in the Q&A period. And if you're on Zoom, you can also type questions into the chat area. And without further ado, I will pass things over to JP.
Thank you, Demi, and thank you to the TNR library system. My name is JP. I work with the Kamloops Society for the Written Arts, and we partner with the TNR library system on cool events like this. The sort of way we describe this is cool authors talking about cool ideas. And so we're very pleased to have Shawn, who's a very cool author, with us tonight, talking about some cool ideas. I would like to start by acknowledging that we are hosting this on the traditional and unceded territory of the Shuswap peoples. And it's a big honor to work, live, and play, as well as laugh and love and create on this sacred ground. So I want to tell you just a little bit about Shawn before I turn it over to her. She's a high school English teacher in the Shuswap region of BC, as well as an author and a poet. Her first novel in 2009 was the young author novel, Grace Awakening, Dreams and Power. She's written several teen novellas in a fictional BC town. She might read from one of those tonight, I think. A new one, maybe?
Not that one.
Not that one, different one. And in 2018, she published a noir-vella, Murdering Mr. Edwards, which was nominated for an Arthur Ellis Crime Writers Award, so big thing there. She's published several books of poetry, Live, Love, Hope, 2011, A Year in Love. And she has very eclectic interests and involvements of all sorts. You could probably ask her about training poodles, about the harp, about shoes, about knitting scarves, and she'd be able to entertain you with answers. So without further ado, it's my great pleasure to welcome Shawn. Shawn.
Thank you. And thank you both to the Thompson-Nicola Library, which I think might be my favorite library to present at, and JP for the Kamloops Society of the Written Arts. I appreciate the invitation very much. So it's a pleasure to be here. And I am also on the traditional territory of the Secwepemc people here in the Shuswap. First, before I get started, I just want to let everyone know that I have a handout for you with some notes. And you can find that if you go to my website, shawnbird.com, and it is there so that you can download my pointers, and it has links to some of the resources that I mention at the end. So I thought I would start with a couple of readings. The first reading I'm going to do is from this itty bitty little chapbook called Mickey Docs and the Line of Chalk. I have a series of these little books. They're meant so that you could like put them in an envelope and mail them away to your friend. It's like a short story. And they feature the power of shoes, great shoes, which is a bit of a passion. And so I have that one. And then I'm going to read from my most recent poetry collection, Live, Love, Hope, just a few. So I'm going to screen share. And then I'll start my presentation, and I will keep the screen share up while I'm doing the presentation so you can follow along with the notes. And then I'll come back live for the Q&A. So, can you see my screen? Give me an applaud or something, JP, if you can see my screen well.
Looks good. We can see it.
Okay, great. Okay, so I am coming down. This is where we are reading from today. Nikki pushed on the door to the office, but instead of opening, it held firm and her head thumped into the glass. She looked through the greasy oval she'd just left on the window and peered around the office in search of her assistant, Kip. He was always in the office before her. Even if she arrived an hour before they opened, Kip was there, tidying the stockroom or the kitchenette, sitting in his desk, reading the mail or arranging flowers in a vase. But today, the office door remained locked. Nikki rummaged through her purse to find her office keys. It had been a long time since she'd unlocked in the morning. She pushed through the door and froze, nostrils twitching, as she caught a whiff of something that did not belong there. She closed her eyes and rotated left and right, trying to narrow in on the source of the smell. The scent was a pungent cross between the compost bin and a butcher shop. The hairs rose up on the back of her neck. There was a rap on the glass door, and she jerked, gasping as she turned to face it. "Kip!" She placed her hand over her pounding heart and exhaled deeply. "You scared me." "Sorry I'm late," said Kip as he covered a yawn. "Cody has the flu. It was a long, disgusting night." "Ooh, what's that smell?" "My question exactly. I think it's coming from over there." She flicked her chin in the direction of Richard Von Dick's desk. "He probably left a tuna sandwich in his desk drawer over the weekend," said Kip. He walked over to Richard's workstation. He shook the drawers. "Did you know he's got locks on all his drawers?" Nikki rolled her eyes. "That sounds like him. He's so devious himself, he doesn't trust anyone else." She joined Kip beside the desk. "Smell's definitely coming from over here, though." She leaned in, sniffing in a sweeping arc from right to left and then up and down. "Right there," she pointed to the left bottom drawer. "Phew, that's disgusting." "Should I phone him and tell him to pick up some baking soda on the way home so we can neutralize it?" Nikki laughed. "Right, like he'd do that." "You know he's going to blame me for this, whatever it is," said Kip. Nikki nodded. "Yeah, you didn't, did you? This isn't a practical joke?" "Hell no, I have to work in here too. I wouldn't pollute my own air." "What do you think? Would he have stashed desk keys somewhere?" She looked around for a place that would be a logical spot to hide drawer keys. Nikki checked the clock above her desk. "He's so late." "That's weird." Kip confirmed the time on his phone. 15 minutes. That's uncharacteristic of him. Nikki gave up her inspection for a key and strolled back to her desk. "We just have to wait for him. I can't imagine if he's locking his drawers that he'd leave keys anywhere we'd find them." "I'll go get the mail." "Yes, thanks, Kip." Nikki sat down behind her desk and checked her day planner. She had one appointment in the afternoon, but the morning was clear. She glanced up to the clock again. Now Richard was half an hour late. In all her years at Horn & Company, Richard Van Dyck had never been more than 5 minutes late. Did he have a morning appointment? She got up and checked the day planner he'd left on the corner of his desk. Nothing was scheduled for today at all. Could he have gotten sick? Maybe Cody wasn't the only one who'd come down with the flu this weekend. Richard, though a total jerk, was punctilious, so he'd have been sure to have phoned as soon as he determined he wasn't able to make it in. She glanced at the phone. Sure enough, there was a message indicator light blinking. Kip came through the door with a bundle of envelopes and small packages. He sorted them into 3 piles, set one pile on Nikki's desk, one on his own desk, and then crossed the office and left the 3rd pile on Richard's desk. Kip smirked up at her as he reached for his little reproduction elven sword and slit open his envelopes. He pulled a letter wrapped around something out of a padded manila envelope. He unwrapped the letter and let out a squeak. He threw the envelope back and pushed away from the desk, gliding quickly back on his wheeled chair. Nikki stood up in response to his horror-stricken expression on his face. "What is it?" Kip's mouth opened and closed, but only strange squeaks erupted. He pointed. Nikki leaned over her own desk and gasped to see a severed human hand. A whiff of rotten meat wafted to her nose, and the true horror hit her. She lunged for her garbage can and vomited. "Do you recognize it?" she whispered, wiping her mouth. "Do we know whose hand it is?" Kip shook his head. "Could it be Richard's, do you think?" And that's where we end that one for you. There's a little more story to come. Check it out. Thank you. And I have some poems from Live, Love, and Hope. The first one is very short. Anything is possible. Anything? Anything. That's it. The next one's longer. What has changed? Since Me Too has spread, what has changed is that I see you differently. I see me differently. I hear, she does that stuff, I'm working. I'm filled with fury at yet another man who does not see what work is, how everything he is able to do is because his wife carries him on her back. And I say, enough. If women are to be beasts of burden, let us be more than mules with bits in our mouths. Let us be rampaging elephants. Let us be more. Let us be heard. Let the children be his concern as often as they're ours. Let the pink jobs and the blue jobs become purple jobs as they swirl in a kaleidoscope of our jobs. Mutual obligations, like us. I'm glad you do the laundry and clean the kitchen because I hate those jobs. Thank you for agreeing that poetry and winding words are more important than dusting. When your words reflect a patriarchy, I will remind you who I am. When my words cut, you may wrap your arm around me and remind me that you have feelings too. Let's stand as role models that being a man does not give you rights over anyone else, anyone. Listen, men, to what she says. Keep your hands to yourself and other pokey bits too. If she says no, channel your unwanted urges into art. Wash them away in cold showers of reality. Let your futile frustrations seethe like generations of women seethed. What has changed, boys? The very air you breathe. Number 3. This one's called Truth and Dare. Here is the true thing, my children. It is dark outside. There are beasts with teeth and claws prepared to rip and tear you into tiny bits. Oh yes, my children, it is dark outside. You must beware. But come, my children, here is another true thing. There is light outside. It glows from windows and from hearts. It pulls what's apart together, wrapping gleaming strands of hope that shimmer if you look just so. See, there in your heart, a star. Dare, my children, to shine. It is dark outside. You must be light. And the final poem to share with you today is called Little Steps. And this one is for all of you writers. Little steps, great dreams, big hopes, massive endeavors, long journeys, all large things take little steps. Bit by bit, bite by bite, step by step. War and peace started with one word on the page. Beethoven's Fifth Symphony began with one note. Huge begins small. Just begin. Thank you. So our topic today is planning or plotting, pantsing, and poetry. And so the plotting part is about planning your project ahead of time. And that can be that can be poetry, but that fits more with the set forms. In particular, that planning is, I'm thinking about for novels or other nonfiction books. And your planning can take a lot of different methods. It might be very great detail. You might go into the minuteness of what you're wanting to get done. Or it might be a vague outline. It may be something you do on paper or on cards or on charts or on sticky notes or in the computer, or maybe you do all of your planning in your head. When I'm planning a poem, I spot an image. That planning almost all happens inside my head. But when I'm planning a novel or a novella, that takes different forms. So, and pantsing is when you just sit down in front of your computer or with your notebook and pen and you just start writing. You write with no plan, no idea where the story is going. You don't know what the ending is. But even that can take a variety of forms. It may be that you start from the very beginning and you write straight through to the end. Or you might write in a variety of scenes, whatever strikes your fancy on any given day is what you write. And then you end up with a patchwork that you have to assemble later. In most cases, that first pantsing draft is something we will call a discovery draft. And a discovery draft is when you as the author are discovering the story. You might have no idea what story you want to tell, so you pants the whole thing out, and then you have a draft, and it's very rough, and it's probably an absolute disaster, but at least you now know what the story is. So some people do that discovery by planning, and some people just do it by pantsing, and that's fine. Now, set forms, when we think about, so that's the planning and the pantsing, and here we are coming into the poetry. What does planning or these set forms look like when you're looking at poetry? And so the modern penchant for poetry is free verse. You don't see very much rhyming poetry published at all anymore. There are very little attention to strict meter. So all that stuff that you learned in high school, if you're my age, or that you studied in university, isn't really very relevant in the current active poetry community. You'll remember that a sonnet has 14 rhyming lines and it's written in iambic pentameter, and you get that nice da-da, 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 da-da all the way through. Or that a haiku has 17 syllables on 3 lines, and it has a 5-7-5 syllable count. And that depends if you're speaking Japanese or if you're speaking English, and there are ways to twist it, but there are rules. And a villanelle is another one that has really complex rules, 19 lines with 4 tercets and a quatrain and a very strict ABA rhyming pattern. And why would you want to write poetry like that? Why was that popular? And I think it's because when you're forced to take your creativity and jam it into a form, make it fit into a box, as it were, it forces you to be even more creative. You have to focus on the idea. And sometimes you need an extra 2 or 3 words to make the line work, and you'll pull out a word and it's not what you were expecting, and it takes your poem in a slightly different way, and that's an epiphany too. So the forms are empowering and drive your creativity in new ways. So it's not horrible to write with a form. It can be really powerful. I've noticed that I teach a form called the Pantoum, P-A-N-T-O-U-M, which is has a strict rhyme scheme and a repeating meter. And I've seen incredible modern versions on that where they keep the repetition, but they've tossed the rhyme scheme. So you can look at the old models and you can play with them and toss them and make them new, the fact that you're sort of working around a structure can empower your poetry to new places. And if you've never explored those, there are lots of them available. You can just, April is NaPoWriMo, National Poetry Month, and you can find places that do prompts and things and introduce you to lots of these forms. So investigate if you're interested in poetry and see whether a set form can help you structure your poetry a little bit. Now we do have set forms in novel writing too, and that takes the place of a genre novel. So a genre novel has accepted tropes that the readers expect. So a trope is just an element that is constant in that genre, an element that you see all the time. And they're like familiar friends, right? So in a horror movie or a horror book, you find lurking evil, and there's the don't go into the basement, and the last girl, and the running up the stairs while something's chasing you. It's never going to go well. Look what happened to Stephenie Meyer when she broke a horror trope. She made her vampires sparkle, and people freaked out. It worked out all right for her financially, and she picked up a big audience that wouldn't normally be reading vampire books. So there's a win, lose, win, whatever. So, take it with a grain of salt. Romance has tropes like you first your friends, and then, oh, you fall in love. All sorts of love triangles. Oh, it's your second chance of love. It went really badly the first time. Maybe it's even the same person, second chance at love. When a reader comes, they go, oh yeah, I like this. They feel comfortable. They know what to expect. And knowing what to expect is why you read genre novels. Crime writing tropes are like the unreliable narrator, the irascible detective, the intrepid reporter. And I was chuckling at that when I was writing those, because I think Jim Butcher hits all of those in his weird Dresden Files, which are supernatural detective, but he's still hitting all those classic crime writing tropes while he's introducing all the supernatural. And I think that also makes it really popular. So you take what is common in one element and you meld it with what is common in another, and you end up with a whole new creative, interesting thing that grabs readers. So take the set form, take those tropes and play with them, make them your own, make them new, look at them in a different way, and they'll empower your writing too. So how do you plan a novel? If you want to be a planner, what do? Well, there's lots of things that you can look up on the internet that will help you plan. So one is the 6-stage plot structure by Michael Hogue. And this one is based on a 3-act structure. So basically 3-act structure is beginning, middle, and end. It's the classic Greek drama structure. And start with introducing the character to a new situation. Then they have a change of plans. Then they progress through the story. They have a point of no return. They have complications and higher stakes, and then a final push, and then their aftermath. And Michael calls that 6 stages. And yet it's almost identical to the 7-point story structure, which is by Dan Wells. Or Joseph Nassis does one like that with Story Engine. You start, the first section is your preparation for your story. Then it's what's the inciting incident? What is the thing that changes the story? Then the character reacts to it. Then the character has to focus on the problem and overcome it. Then there's a final something that happens that stirs him, and then the story is concluded. So still, it's almost the same elements. There's still the same crucial 3-act structure. Something that's slightly more complex, like if you're planning a 6-stage, you might have very little written down. If you're doing a full hero's journey, like Joseph Campbell's model, you might be using beat sheets the Blake Snyder or Jessica's version. Blake did the original one that was a screenwriting one. Jessica has the Save the Cat writes the novel. Blake Snyder's book is Save the Cat. Excellent stuff. Breaks down it's 24 steps. So it covers almost the same things in the 3-act structure, but it's in much greater detail. I teach all of those to my high school writing students, and I have them try each one to see which works for them, because you don't know until you've tried it what is going to work for you. And the one that they voted as their absolute favorite was Randy's Snowflake method. And the Snowflake method is quite a bit more complicated. It starts with 10 steps, but it's a lot of writing. So it starts with 1-sentence summary. That's your first step. Summarize your entire novel, the whole point of it, in 1 sentence. And then you snowflake into something slightly more complicated, and you take that sentence and you turn that into a paragraph, and you look at your setup and 3 disasters and your ending. And then you snowflake out a little bit more, so your crystals are growing as they're tumbling through the air, as it were. Then you start thinking about characters, and for each character you summarize their role in the story in 1 sentence. And then you build on what their goal is in the story, what their motivation is on the story, what their personal conflict is, and at the end, what will be their epiphany. And you build that from a paragraph to whole page summaries, and you build it and you build it and you build it until you end up with pages and pages of planning. But it's very thorough if you're planning. And unlike the other 2 methods or 3 methods that focus on plot, the Snowflake method also has character planning built right in. So what does that planning look like? So you can plan in a lot of different ways. Here are some that I pulled from the internet, and I don't even know who these people are, most of them. So maybe you use sticky notes. Nice organized sticky notes. Crazily unorganized looking sticky notes, although they are organized. This one is a 6-point plan. Each one of those doors is a section of that author's planning. This one runs down 2 walls, and you can see the finished writing at the bottom of each one. So the planning is in a section, and then there's the writing that was produced at the bottom. This one is a little closer to what I do. So here's cards. This is a lot of cards. And I think these are characters are color-coded here on this one. This person is a serious overachiever in my mind. This is what I do most often. So this is a basic 7-point. So when I'm starting, particularly a short story, I'm just focusing on the basis of this one. And the 7-point in this case starts at the end. You first figure out how the story is going to end. Then you come back and look at your hook. And then you go into the middle of the story. And then you go to your first plot change between the hook and the midpoint. And then you go to your plot turn between the midpoint and the ending. And then you have your little pinches that you add in between again. So that one builds from the back forward and into the middle. It's kind of weird, but my students didn't mind that one either. My grade 11 is like that. I find that really quick and easy. Or you can do it on paper. This is actually J.K. Rowling and J.K. Rowling's Order of the Phoenix. So you can see how she's got a timeline down the left side there, and she's got her chapter titles, and then the key events of the plot, what elements of the prophecy are being hit, different things about the characters, what's happening with Dumbledore's army, what's happening with the Order of the Phoenix. So that one, I mean, it's great detail, but it's very scribbly on paper, and you could just put that on your bulletin board and that'd be great. All the information's there, kind of done that. And if you wanted to be even more of an overachiever, you could do it on so many sheets of paper that you had to glue them all together. This is a beat sheet. This is based on the Blake Snyder thing. And because it's a screenwriting tool, you start with an image and then you return to that image at the end. And there's the path for what that looks like. So, which is the best? To plan or not to plan? That is the question, right? So, here is the secret. The secret is you do you. Try things and pick what works for you. And the thing that works for you is the thing that's best. And it doesn't mean that you're going to be exactly the same with every project. Some projects I do one way, some projects I do another, some projects I pants, some I plan in depth. The Nikki Knox stories, I plan with Nicolette Jones, who's the artist. We discuss them in advance. We know how it's going to end. We know what the theme of that story is, and we pick a few important events or images, and then I come home and I write the story. So we have complex options, not complex options. There are famous authors who do both. I know, okay, Jonas Saul, he's writes the Sarah Roberts stories. He doesn't, he's an intense pantser, and he sits down and he'll write 10,000 words a day for 2 weeks to write a whole book. He sort of knows in his head before he starts something that's going to happen, but he doesn't plan much. Then he sits down and he pantsers the whole thing in 2 weeks, and then he's exhausted and he's done, and then he edits. And he's able to release quite a few books every year. Contrast that with Diana Gabaldon, the Outlander author. Diana is also a pantser, but she writes in scenes. She never knows where the story's going. She says she's totally bored if she does any planning ahead of time. So she ends up sometimes writing the same scene 2 or 3 times because the books are so long and she's forgotten, and it takes her 4 years to get through hers. She polishes every scene and then figures out where it goes. And then her editors have to help her with anything that might be extra and over. She has really good editors. And 26 million books out. Can't be wrong. J.K. Rowling, as you saw, is a planner. So famous authors and making lots of money do it both ways. You can do whatever the heck you want. Try different things. Try some of those methods that I showed you there. See if any of those work for you. And there you go. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and see if there's any questions.
Thanks, Shawn. I know that Demi's going to moderate some questions coming in through the Facebook feed. Can I start you off with a question that I have?
Sure.
So you're a teacher.
Yep.
You also write YA.
Yep.
I got to think that one of those helps the other, and probably both inform each other. But can you tell us about how being a teacher, a high school teacher, informs what you do as an author?
Well, the characters are often familiar. So, or they have hobbies that are familiar, or their voices are familiar. When Grace Awakening, it was nominated for a Whistler Independent Book Award, and the reviewers said really nice things about the students' voices, like the YA characters' voices felt really real to the reviewer, and credited that to the fact that I'm an English teacher. And I think that's true because, you know, I spend a lot of time with teenagers. I've been teaching 28 years or something. So that's a lot of time with teenagers. So, you know, I understand their lives a little bit. I don't write really gritty stuff. I know some of the really horrible stuff that my students are going through, and I don't much write about that. I prefer to have a different kind of angle on it. But when I was writing Grace, for example, I would have kids read scenes, or I would ask, I don't know how to ride a motorcycle. So actually that was in the Life of Laketon one. I didn't know how to ride a motorcycle. And so I had some kid like, who has a motorcycle, who has a dirt bike? And can you read this scene and tell me whether the mechanics of it are correct, right? And so the kid, oh, no, you can't do this. And no, it doesn't sound like that when you do it. And it starts this way, and they wouldn't do that, and they would do this, and it doesn't rev up, it revs down. And it was like, okay. When I was doing Grace, there's a boxing scene, and I think I counted down, and the kid in my class who was a boxer says, no, you count up, or vice versa. So, you use your resources. And occasionally, like when I was writing Grace, so like, hey, I have this book that's my first one. It's like, anybody want to read it and see whether you have anything to say? And I had a lot of kids giving me feedback for that one 10 years ago. I haven't done that since. I did that with that first one. I haven't really had kids read them since then. The Laketon ones, actually, I don't know if any kid read those when they were live, except for the little snippets. But it helps. Laketon is actually Sicamous. And I taught it at Sicamous in 2 different periods, 3 years, and then a break of about 7 or 8 years, and then 3 years again. And there's something about that town that those kids they know each other really well, and there are some things that come up because it's a small town and because the kids know each other really well. And maybe it's also because, it's a really small school. It was 200 the first time I was teaching there, and it's down to 100 the second time I was teaching there, grades 8 to 12. And so as a teacher, you see all of those grades all the time. And I found that knowing those kids so well and being into their stories kind of fueled a lot of creativity and a lot of books. So there are a lot of things that happen that aren't specific to any one kid or any one situation, but are kind of inspired by a trend that I would see in things that were happening with this bunch of kids or that bunch of kids. And so I had these Laketon characters, and I would give them the assorted things that I was sort of seeing. So that's part of that too. So Murdering Mr. Edwards, though, that one came straight out of school because we were thinking about the stress of school and the tension as teachers. And I started thinking that if you could murder anyone in your classroom, how could you do it? Because in a school, I thought, teachers know dangerous stuff. We really know a lot of stuff. The English teacher knows nothing. She's like all literature and airy-fairy. But those physics guys and those math guys and those the PE teachers are brutal, right? So you remember them. So I had my colleagues pitch me ideas. And so there's 12 stories in that book, and every one of them, the obnoxious English teacher is murdered by a different member of the staff in their area of expertise. And that was so much fun to write. And that was I did it for fun, and it got picked up by Coffin Hot Press in Calgary. The premise was just so bizarre. And that's the one that was nominated for the Arthur Ellis. So yeah, fun.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you for that. We have a question coming in through Facebook that I'd love to ask on behalf of Cheryl. Cheryl asks, do you plot or pants endings? And how do you make it fresh if you plot an ending out?
Well, I was talking to my students about this today. And what I was telling them was that when you're starting a book, you need to know where it's going so that you're heading in the right direction. That does not mean you can't change your mind while you're on the journey. And if your characters start telling you something different is going on, or something unexpected shows up in the middle of your story, that you can take a turn and some new thing can happen and the ending can be different. But if you don't have a direction that you're going, your story will be all over the place and it will feel unfocused, and your audience will sense that. And if you have a direction, they will also feel that they're on the journey. I talked about it in terms today. My example with them was if you see a tracking dog and the track is lured, the lure is laid down on a track, on a path, and the dog has to find that lure. And when they do it, they don't go in a straight line. They weave, right? They make little figure eights back away from the lure path, and then they find it again. And that's how they go. And reading and writing is like that. You're going in the right direction, but you're not going in a straight line. You're weaving it up and down. And the ending should be, I mean, even if you know, it should be a bit of a surprise. You want it to be a surprise. You want to build it. You want to make sure you've laid enough hints, but you can do that in the edits too. And if when you're reading your first draft and you think it's boring, then you know that you've got some work to do.
Right.
Does that answer that question, Cheryl?
I think that's great. Yeah, that's great. We have another question too. It's not, Dennis asks, he says he loves the idea of writing the ending first. The murky middle is where I need to plot out or else I'll never get done. Do you have any tips for keeping the middle fresh and funner, in quotation marks, to write?
Yeah, the bog, that bog. I know what you mean. The thing that I hear most often, because this comes up all the time at writing conferences, this is like common space, right? This is where you lose sight. So if you haven't already written your ending and you don't know where you're going, I tell kids, I have my writing 12 kids actually, like some of them have been writing a novel since they were in grade 6 and they're still writing. And I say, write the ending now. Start right now, write the ending, and then you'll be able to finish it. And usually they are able to finish it by the end of the school year. So yay them, they've drafted their first novel when they're 17. And it may have taken them, years, but they've accomplished that. And it'll probably be crap, but it's still done. And that's huge, right? You know that. If you're having trouble in your middle and you can't quite get aside, that's when it's really handy to look at those beat sheets. Pull up a Blake Snyder Save the Cat beat sheet and see if you're hitting the high points. Have you got your midpoint twist? Have you got the next section leading to the final push? Have you hit all the markers? And if you're hitting the markers, then you're good. I think, like, you don't have to use them in your first draft. You can use them in your editing stage. And you don't have to have every little piece, but they can be very, very helpful to help you frame out and make sure that you're hitting what you need to hit. And maybe you've hit everything and you just need to just climb out of the bog and move on. Mm-hmm. I hope that helps.
Yeah, good idea. Sometimes you just have to climb out of the bog. Wonderful. Yeah, Dennis says it sounds good. So thank you very much for that answer.
You're welcome.
Another one has come in from Facebook. Carolyn asks, do you publish other authors' work?
Do I publish other authors' work?
Yeah, or maybe we can generalize that a little bit about, are you involved with other authors and do you assist them in any way?
Well, it's too bad I don't have my students' work because my Writing 12 class actually publish every year. So, except for my core group from last year, pandemic kids didn't get to. But the Writing 12 kids, the 11s and the 12s, my creative writing classes, we publish an anthology, which is released through Amazon. It has an ISBN. It's a real genuine book. We do a paperback that is printed at cost, and then the ebook one, which is at the lowest setting I can put it for in Amazon. And they give them real genuine publishing credit. The grade 12s do a capstone project and I walk them through. We do lots of practice stuff usually for the first half of the course. And then in the second half of the course, they've planned a capstone project and they produce it. So it could be a novella, it could be their first draft of a novel that they've always wanted to finish, that they've had going for years. It might be a poetry collection, it might be a collection of short stories. And I coach them through that so that at the end of the year, they actually have a book in their hand. So some of them choose to do just a manuscript that's for them. Nobody is ever going to see it. Some of them choose to do an ebook, and I help them format it for that, and they can upload it to Amazon as an ebook only. Some of them do an actual perfect bound book, just like a regular paperback on the shelf, and get great art and astounding stuff. And I help them edit, work through them with them, and they have amazing product. So in that case, yes, I kind of book coach them, I guess, through to have publishing, because my goal is that all of my grade 12s at least are published by the end of the year, or have something that is publishable if they choose not to publish it. And we talk about pseudonyms, and a lot of them will release their work as pseudonyms so that they don't have to have their juvenilia following them forever.
Sure.
But yeah, so I do that. Does that count?
It does, yeah, no, and I appreciate that. And maybe you can talk a little bit, because you've been picked up by a publisher and you've self-published, correct? So do you want to talk about sort of the difference here? I think for a lot of emerging or really beginning writers, that's where a lot of the uncertainty is how do I get my work out there, and what's the strategy? And I know we all have different thoughts about this and approaches, and you've sort of been in both. In both
camps, yeah. So, well, here I'll tell you my publishing journey for Grace Awakening. So I wrote my first novel, 155,000 word YA novel. And I went to the Surrey International Writing Conference. And I went for one day. I was petrified. I wasn't sure I should. Casey Dyer, who's a YA author, talked me into it, said, yes, come. So I registered in October and went. You cannot do that now. Now, Surrey Writers Conference literally sells out within 2 hours of registration opening in June. But this was 10 years ago, and you could still go in October. I went to a workshop on how to pitch a novel in the morning. I practiced a pitch with the author who was doing that presentation. That afternoon, I pitched my novel to a small press author. They asked for pages. A year later, they offered me a contract. So it was a very long process. October, I've signed the contract. I'm going to be published by a small press called Gumboot Books out of Vancouver. They specialized in the school market and kids books. And we had big plans. And then in February, I got a letter from Jared and Crystal, and they said, regret to inform you that Gumboot Books is going out of business. And I was like, no. However, I have a friend who is a musician, and he had his first album published by a small subsidiary of Capitol Records. And when that small subsidiary went out, he lost all his rights and his movement, and the copies all disappeared. And he said, Shawn, don't sweat it. It's good that it happened before it was actually released. Rather than after. And Crystal from Gumboot Books said, you know, this book is ready. And sure, another publisher would probably pick it up, but it's ready to go now. So why don't you just release it? And if I hadn't been waiting a year and a half and hadn't been so eager and didn't have all those people who knew that that book was coming out, I probably would have been smarter to wait and actually pitch it at another event and just suck it up and spend more time with it. I didn't. I didn't have any idea about marketing. I didn't have any idea of what to do with it. And so it's out, it's sold quite well. The average Canadian book of any stripe sells fewer than 200 copies. So I am totally above average. I've sold way more than 200 copies, but you know, it hasn't sold millions. So it's done well. It gets, you know, good results, but Murdering Mr. Edwards was picked up by the small press Coffin Hop in Calgary. Lovely guys to work with, Axel and Rob. They were great. They do all sorts of events in Calgary, and I got to be part of some of those events and sold lots of books with them. But they're a small press, and they have other jobs, and they have other things going on, so they're not dedicated to their authors straightforward either. I have lots of friends who are published by bigger presses, and they say the same thing, that you know, their press will take them so far, and then what then? So the marketing is around the really biggest. Diana Gabaldon does not have this problem, right? She gets great PR and events, and big events will happen to promote her books.
Right.
The rest of us, we're probably not going to get those events. And so then we come back. Are we better off? I don't know. I was pitching poetry to Howard White, and he was telling me, he's Douglas and McIntyre now, Harvard Publishing, and he said, well, how many people follow your blog and your poetry blog? And I was like, well, there's over 17,000 on my blog. And he said, Shawn, there isn't a poetry magazine in Canada that has an audience of 17,000. So publish yourself. You don't need anybody else. You've already got the audience. So, okay. So there's definitely a sense that you've made it when somebody else bought your work, right? You feel validated when somebody else bought it. So there's that. On the other hand, there are a lot of independent authors who are laughing all the way to the bank because they have learned how to do their marketing, and even if the quality of their books, you kind of go, oh, look at all these typos in their book. They know how to tell a story, they know how to generate interest, they know how to run their advertising campaign, and they are making good money. There are people making thousands and thousands and thousands every month because they know how to do it. They put out a lot of books. They like 4, 5, 6, 7 a year. They know how to do a series. They know how to market it. They spend the time, the money, they invest in the big money on their ads, but it pays out.
Sure.
Which is better? Whatever you want to spend the time doing. You can't get away from the marketing. We have to do our own marketing, because if you're with a big publisher, they're not going to do it for a small author, for their first-time author.
Right.
If you're with a small press, they don't have the budget, so you have to do your own marketing. And if you're independent, you have to do your own marketing. So if you are a student and you want to take a creative writing degree, also take a dual marketing degree.
Ah, that's interesting. Yeah, I'm going to guess that a lot of people studying writing are not thinking about that.
I know it's not most of our ballywick, right? We're in there
Right.
because we are words people, not because we are numbers people. We don't know how to study the Google Analytics data. Man, that stuff just like, I hate that stuff. And I'm still hunting for somebody, like I'm trying to convince my husband that he should do it, but he's not good at math either. I have a friend who is good at that, and I'm still working on her. So finding someone who can be your partner would be a dream.
Right. Can you tell me, I mean, one of the things that you mentioned, I'm sorry, I'm blanking here for a second. The pandemic, sorry. How has this impacted your sort of writing? I mean, I've talked to a lot of authors who have basically been paralyzed for the past 6 months.
Yeah, sounds familiar.
Okay, so you're in that camp. I've talked to a few. It seems they're more in the first camp, but I've talked to a few that have gotten a lot of work done. But you're in.
Yeah, I think there's some that it's like, oh, I've been waiting for a chance that I can actually sit down and write, and I'm finally going to do that novel that I've never written. In a way, it could be. Nicolette Jones and I plotted a year ago, August 2019, plotted the next 3 Nikki Knox books, and I've got half of book 4 written, and I know the plot for 5 and 6, but hasn't happened yet. And now school's back in, and we're on the quarter system, so my students
Right.
are taking 2 courses for 10 weeks and then switching it up all year. And so right now that's great because I have prep in my C block, so we teach all morning and then have a prep all afternoon. But I don't have a prep then after November. So I'm going to have to go the rest of the year with a huge English 12 marking load with my creative writing marking load, where I'm having kids writing novels and novellas.
Right.
And I don't get a prep block at school. So I will be at school every day till 6 or 7 once November hits. When am I going to do my own writing? I come home and I'm just staggering. I don't have the energy for it. This is also a result of a brain injury I had in 2018. I fainted and whacked my head and ended up with a serious post-concussion syndrome. And just getting back to work has been a huge thing. And at the end of the day, my brain is done. It's just literally done. So sitting down to write is really hard. So I've been doing poetry and I've done shorts, but I haven't been working on novels for a while because I did have a bunch of novellas, like the Laketon books were already done in my computer, released while I was dealing with my brain injury. But I didn't write them at that time. I had written them 3 or 4 years before. So.
Well, that's a lot. And I mean, honestly, as a teacher, you must, it's taxing. I mean, I'm sure, especially with all the other things on top of it. And I did remember what I wanted to ask you. I'm so sorry that I had it in my mind and then I blanked. It was about community and actually engaging with other writers and with the writing community. Because you mentioned going to the Surrey International Writers Festival and you were very nervous about it. And I ask this in part because, you know, we do a lot of events, not only this, but we do a writers festival. We do all these things.
Right.
And it's very important to me to get younger and unengaged writers to join, but there's a barrier there. It's intimidating, and a lot of people think it's going to be a bunch of people stroking their chins talking about their publications, and that's intimidating. And we keep trying to get people over that and to convince them that it's very, very worthwhile to engage with other writers, to go to workshops, to find other people. Can you talk about that for a bit?
You know, it is so important to have other people that also have voices in their heads. Because your family and friends think you're nuts, right? They don't get it. Or they're supportive, but they don't really understand. It's like, yeah, you're right. Oh, I love your book. And they're just not in your brain place. Whereas when you're hanging out with people that are like, oh, my main character, why did she go and do that? Because now it screws up all my plan. Talking about changing your endings, right? Those are your people. Those are the people that you understand. Those are the people that you feel at home with. I also attend When Words Collide and the Word on the Lake in Salmon Arm. And When Words Collide is one that I go to in Calgary. And that one, it is such a community. It is, it's like Surrey is mostly big traditional publishers and agents and quite big name people at that one. You know, New York agents come into that one. It feels like literary in some ways. When Words Collide is genre and small press, and it feels homey, and everybody's friendly. And after you've done 1 year, even though the newbies are welcomed, but after you've been there 1 year, you know everybody, and everybody is warm and comfortable. When you go, you feel like you're home. You're with your people. They understand you. You stay up all night in your blanket forts and you're having fun. And it's weird and it's wacky, but they're your people. And having your people who get you, who understand you, there are no words for how important that is and how empowering that is and how that can get you over all those really rough spots when you're stuck in a project, when you don't need advice because you really know what to do, but you just need somebody who understands to kind of be with you and walk alongside of you as you go through that journey, or who really knows what you're celebrating when you finish that damn crappy first draft and they recognize what a huge accomplishment it is. You need people who believe you and are okay with it, you know? It's good to hang out with other writers, and I wouldn't have believed it. Like, I always thought, oh, they're too expensive, it's not worth your time, but oh my God, it's totally worth your time and your investment. And When Words Collide is really cheap. It's like $40 or $50, and you get 3 days of workshops, something like 400 workshops to choose from.
Yeah.
Go to When Words Collide if you can.
Yeah, that's amazing. And thank you. And I don't say that just as so that you can plug our activities, but we do them for a reason, and we do them because writers need community, sometimes even more than they know, before they engage.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we have, maybe we'll have one last question here that's coming in from Facebook. It's kind of a novel of a question. And so the questioner has apologized for the novel of a question, but I'll read it to you. Kimberly asks, how do you keep from creating inconsistencies in a novel as you write your way through, especially if you are pantsing it? I find that I sort of forget certain details and change things partway through. Then when I reread all my scenes, things don't line up and I'm having to make changes and rewrite. How do I avoid that?
I have a book where I kept confusing the minor characters' girlfriends. And my editor was like, Shawn, you need to decide whether these are the same character and they have only one girlfriend, or you need to make them a whole lot more distinct in your mind. And you need to make a sign on your board that says, this character is dating this character. This character is dating this character. That's when you get that halfway point in your novel and you need to actually come back and plan and read through in your edits and go, oh no, he's got blonde hair, not dark hair. Or, oh, look, he's got curly hair here, but straight hair here. And you need to be consistent. Eye colors change. Diana Gabaldon does this. We are not the only ones who do this. So we're in good company. This is where you have a really great editor. Something else that I was really bad at when I pants is my time. And I'd have a week go by, but one day was Tuesday and a week later, like 8 days later, it's Wednesday. No, that would actually work. Anyway, you know, the days don't work on a calendar. And Vicky she's just so persnickety. She's got the calendar in her head and she knows what the days are. And you said next month, but it's up in 3 months. Or you said last month and now it's snowing, but it was June and it's not snowing in this place. I got away with that a lot in my novel set in Calgary because their snow can happen anytime, but not in the Shuswap, right? So an editor is really important, or making those notes as you go along. I try and remember, like I keep note cards, and I try and remember to when I said something about a character, like their physical description or whatever, I try to actually write it down somewhere so that it's there and I can refresh it. I always lose the cards. I always have to do it over again. Magazine pictures can help for characters, remembering what characters look like. One of my books, I have a romance novel that's partially written, and I've got a little picture of Chris Pine, and I didn't even know he was Chris Pine. And I just found an actor that looked like this character, just like him, and then he started showing up in all the movies I knew. Like, oh, it's my guy. So that, I don't know if that helps. It's all in the editing if we're pantsing. Notes, sticky notes, cards. Good luck.
Yeah, that's great. It's like managing a project, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Shawn. This has been amazing. I feel very lucky to have had this chance to listen to you and to ask you some questions. And do you have any final thoughts for our audience here?
If you're nervous, if you've got a project in your mind, just do it. Just begin. The journey starts with one step, and don't feel like every word you write has to be perfect. Write that crappy first draft, just get it finished, because the genius is in the editing. You can't edit a blank page.
Thank you. And those are great. That's great advice, Shawn. Thank you so much. Yeah, and on behalf of Kamloops Society for the Written Arts and the Thompson-Nicola Regional Library, we like to say thank you to everyone who's been tuning in. We do events like this every 2 weeks. We have an author come and do a talk. Always cool people talking about cool ideas, just like Shawn. We also, every second week, we do a silent write exercise where we have people come together and write in silence. It's kind of like being alone together, and then we chat. And that's a fun thing too. And on September 26th, we are doing our second annual write-a-thon. Our first one was in person. This one is virtual. And if you head to kswa.ca, you can find some information there about how to participate. And if you head to shawnbird.com, that's shawnbird.com, you can find all sorts of stuff by and about and from Shawn Bird. So thank you again, Shawn. We loved having you, and we hope to see you again soon.
It's been great having you in my living room. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Take care.